June 14, 1968. Quang Tri Province, South Vietnam. The air's already heavy before noon, thick with heat and cordite. The red dirt beside Highway 1 has been torn open by an explosion minutes earlier, and smoke still curls low over the scrub. Somewhere beyond the tree line, rifle fire cracks and then fades, replaced by the hollow thump of distant artillery. On the ground, a small cluster of bodies lies scattered around a crater. Black pajamas soaked dark, one sandal missing, a bamboo pack split open by shrapnel. The radio call comes through broken and urgent. Dustoff! Dustoff! Multiple critical grid, Bravo 27. Captain James O'Neill grips the cyclic of his UH-1D Huey and banks left, the helicopter shuddering as it drops altitude. The red cross painted on the fuselage catches the sun, a symbol that is supposed to mean something to everyone below. Friend, enemy, it doesn't matter. Dustoff flies for the wounded. Period. As the helicopter flares into the landing zone, the rotor wash kicks up dirt, leaves, scraps of burned cloth. Army medics are already running in, rifles slung but fingers nowhere near the triggers. They're trained for this. You don't ask questions in the LZ. You look for breathing. You look for blood. One of the wounded is a woman. She can't be more than 20. Her hair is tied back with a strip of cloth, her face streaked with dirt and blood. Shrapnel is torn into her thigh, bone fragments glint white through the red. Her chest rises in short, panicked gasps. A U.S. Army medic, Specialist 4th Class Robert Doc Hernandez, drops to his knees beside her and goes straight to work. "Pressure here," he says, more to himself than to anyone else, jamming a field dressing into the wound. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't look at the black pajamas and think enemy. He looks at the pulse fluttering weakly under his fingers. She's critical. That's all that matters. The second woman is worse off. She was closer to the blast. Her lower leg is gone below the knee, the stump wrapped hastily in torn fabric. Her eyes are open, unfocused. Shock has already set in. Hernandez snaps an IV into place while another medic lifts her onto a stretcher. Someone yells over the rotor noise, "2 females, 3 males, all VC!" No one responds. The stretcher slides into the Huey anyway. Inside the helicopter, the smell hits hard, blood, sweat, burnt explosives. The cabin is cramped, packed with bodies laid side by side, Americans and Viet Cong indistinguishable once the uniforms are stripped away. Tubes, bandages, hands pressing down on wounds. Hernandez kneels between them, bracing himself as the Huey lifts off and banks hard to avoid small arms fire snapping up from the tree line. The woman with the shattered thigh screams when the helicopter jolts. Hernandez grabs her hand, not because it's in the manual, but because sometimes that's the only thing left to do. "Easy! Easy!" he shouts, though he knows she doesn't understand English. His voice cuts through the engine noise anyway, steady, human. She looks at him, eyes wide, pupils blown. Enemy. American. None of that seems to register. Pain does. Up front, Captain O'Neill keeps the Huey low and fast, skimming the tops of trees. He's flown this route dozens of times. He's carried North Vietnamese regulars, local guerrillas, South Vietnamese civilians, U.S. infantrymen. The paperwork later will reduce all of this to neat lines on a form, female, approx. 20 wars, shrapnel wounds, critical. But right now it's just weight and time. Time is everything. The helicopter clears the worst of the terrain and heads south toward a forward surgical hospital. The Red Cross doesn't make them immune. Everyone in the cockpit knows it, but Dustoff flies anyway. They always do. In the back, the second woman's breathing starts to slow. Hernandez leans over her, fingers at her neck. "Come on," he mutters. "Stay with me." He injects morphine carefully, marks the dosage on her forehead with a grease pencil. Same as he would for an American soldier. Same rules, same care. When the Huey finally touches down at the hospital pad, surgeons are already waiting. There are no questions shouted about allegiance, only injuries. 2 female VC, 1 amputee, 1 femoral shrapnel, Hernandez reports as the stretchers are rushed inside. The doors swing shut behind them. For the women, the war doesn't end there. It only changes shape. The field hospital sits on the edge of a flattened hilltop, canvas and sandbags baked pale by the sun. June 1968 bleeds into night as generators thrum and surgical lamps burn white inside. The wounded arrive in waves, helicopters landing one after another, rotors never fully stopping. Dustoff doesn't rest. Neither do the surgeons. The 2 women are pushed through the flap doors on metal gurneys. their bodies jolting with every uneven plank. Inside, the air is colder, sharp with antiseptic and cautery smoke. A young Army nurse, Lieutenant Susan Markham, steps in to help transfer the first patient onto an operating table. She notes the grease pencil mark on the woman's forehead. Morphine. Time given. It's precise, professional. She nods once at Hernandez before he's already turning back toward the pad. Markham cuts away the black cloth with scissors. It falls to the floor in pieces. What's left is just skin, muscle, blood. The femoral artery has been nicked. The bleeding is catastrophic but controlled for now. A surgeon calls out instructions. Hands move. Instruments clatter into place. No one speaks Vietnamese. The woman groans as anesthesia takes hold, her body arching briefly before going limp. Her face relaxes into something almost peaceful, the lines of fear smoothed out by drugs and exhaustion. On the next table, the amputee is already slipping. Her blood pressure is dropping fast. The surgeon, a major with gray at his temples, doesn't waste words. Prep for transfusion. We're taking the leg higher. The saw buzzes. A nurse looks away for half a second, then forces her eyes back. This is her job. The woman survives the cut, but barely. Her pulse is thin, fast. The surgeon ties off vessels with practiced speed. Outside, another Huey lands. Hours pass. Somewhere around midnight, the fighting has moved away from the area, but the hospital doesn't know that yet. It never does. It exists in a permanent present, wounded arriving, wounded leaving, wounded dying. By morning, the woman with the shrapnel wound is alive, stable, wrapped in clean bandages. The amputee is unconscious, but breathing on her own. Their charts sit at the foot of their beds, clipped to metal frames. Names are missing. Instead, there are descriptions. Female VC. Approximate age unknown. Injuries sustained from explosive device. They're placed in a recovery ward with others like them. Some are South Vietnamese civilians caught in crossfire. Some are North Vietnamese regulars captured during firefights. Guards stand at the entrances, rifles slung low. The rules are clear. Patients are patients. But they are also prisoners. When the first woman wakes, it's late afternoon. The light filtering through the tent is muted, dusty. She blinks, confused, her hand instinctively moving toward her thigh and stopping when pain flares. A low sound escapes her throat, half gasp, half sob. Lieutenant Markham is there within seconds. "Easy," she says, gently pressing the woman's hand back down. "Don't move." The words mean nothing to her, but the tone does. The woman's eyes dart around, taking in the unfamiliar sight, canvas walls, metal beds, strange uniforms. Fear returns fast, sharp. She tries to sit up. Markham shakes her head and holds her shoulders, not forceful, just firm. "You're okay. You're alive." Alive. The word never reaches her ears, but something in Markham's face does. The woman lies back, breathing hard, tears leaking silently from the corners of her eyes. Down the row, the amputee stirs briefly, then fades again. Outside the ward, a young military policeman scribbles notes into a logbook. Female enemy combatants are rare enough to merit attention. Intelligence officers will come later. Not today. Today, the surgeons have told them no interviews, no questioning. Survival comes first. For now, the women exist in a strange suspension, neither fighters nor civilians, neither free nor interrogated. They are bodies being repaired by the same system that hours earlier had tried to kill them. At sunset, the sound of artillery returns, distant and dull. The war is still there, pressing in from all sides. But inside the hospital, under canvas and lights, the rules are different. Here, Dustoff's work is finished. Something else is about to begin. The next morning comes with the sound of boots on wooden planks and the low murmur of voices outside the ward. The humidity has crept back in overnight, turning the air thick and sticky. Sweat beads on foreheads even before the sun clears the horizon. In the women's ward, the day begins quietly. Groans, shallow breathing, the rustle of sheets. The woman with the shrapnel wound wakes fully this time. Her name, unknown to the Americans, is Lan. She doesn't remember the explosion clearly. Only the sudden force, the sensation of being thrown backward, the sharp heat tearing into her leg. What she remembers now is waking in a place that smells wrong, clean, chemical, nothing like the jungle. Her eyes track movement cautiously. A nurse checks her IV, then moves on. A guard stands near the entrance, helmet tilted back, rifle resting against his hip. He watches the room without expression. Lan's breath tightens when she sees him. She understands now. She's not just wounded. She's captured. Fear settles differently this time. Cold. Heavy. In the Viet Cong units, stories circulate constantly about capture. Interrogation. Prison camps. Re-education. Some stories are exaggerated, some are not. Lying there, unable to stand, unable to run, Lan feels the full weight of it pressed down on her chest. Across the ward, the amputee finally wakes. She screams. The sound rips through the tent, raw and animal. A nurse and 2 medics rush in, hands gentle but fast. The woman thrashes weakly, her body reacting before her mind catches up. When she looks down and sees the blanket lying flat where her leg should be, the scream comes again, broken and hoarse. Her name is never recorded in any American report. To them, she becomes female VC, traumatic amputation. To herself, she becomes something else entirely, someone who will never run again, never march, never carry supplies through the jungle at night. The nurse injects more morphine. The screaming fades into sobbing, then silence. Later that day, 2 men in clean fatigues appear at the ward entrance. They don't carry rifles, they carry clipboards. One wears the insignia of military intelligence. They don't enter, not yet. The surgeon steps out to meet them and shakes his head. Not today, he says flatly. They're not stable enough. The intelligence officer hesitates, then nods. He's seen this before. Dustoff patients, especially women, often arrive in worse shape than anyone expects. The jungle doesn't care about gender. Neither do mines. The officers leave, making notes as they go. There will be time later. There is always time later. For now, the women remain under guard, watched but not questioned. They are fed thin broth. Their wounds are cleaned and redressed. Lan's fever spikes briefly and is brought down with antibiotics. She watches everything closely, memorizing faces, routines, guard changes. Even lying flat, she is still a soldier. On the 3rd day, she is able to sit up. Pain flashes white through her leg, but she grits her teeth and forces herself upright. The nurse notices and rushes over, helping her adjust the pillows. No, Lan says softly in Vietnamese, pushing the nurse's hand away. The word surprises them both. The nurse freezes for a moment, then slowly withdraws. Lan breathes hard, sweat soaking her hairline, but she doesn't lie back down. This is how it begins. Not with interrogation, not with threats, but with small, quiet acts of resistance inside a hospital ward. By the end of the week, both women are deemed stable enough for transfer. Not home, not free. Just moved. They are loaded onto a different helicopter this time without red crosses. Their charts are thicker now, filled with notes and observations. Their identities are still blank. The Dustoff crews never see them again. As the helicopter lifts off toward a detention facility farther south, Lan looks down through the open door at the shrinking patchwork of jungle and roads. Somewhere down there, her unit is moving without her. The war continues. For her, a different kind of battle is about to start. The helicopter sets down inside a fenced compound just outside Hue, its skids touching concrete instead of dirt. The air smells different here. Less jungle, more diesel and disinfectant. Guards move in quickly. Efficient, practiced. The women are unloaded on stretchers again, but this time there are no surgeons waiting, no urgency in the hands that guide them. Only procedure. Lan is transferred into a long, low building with barred windows. It isn't a prison in the way she imagined. No cells, no shouting. But it isn't a hospital either. The beds are lined up in rows. Armed guards stand at both ends of the hall. The wounded are separated by category. Civilians to one side, enemy combatants to the other. Men and women together, injury being the only real divider. Within hours, the questions begin. A Vietnamese interpreter sits across from Lan, a U.S. officer just behind him, silent, observing. The interpreter's voice is calm, almost gentle. Name, unit, area of operation. Lan says nothing. The officer watches her carefully. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with calculation. He knows this routine. Wounded prisoners often hold out at first. Pain and fear make silence easier than truth. The amputee is questioned separately. Her shock has dulled into something hollow. When they ask her name, she gives it. When they ask about her unit, she shakes her head and starts to cry. The interpreter notes her condition. The officer waves him off. "Not fit for interrogation," he says quietly. That decision likely saves her from days of pressure. Instead, she is classified as permanently disabled. Within weeks, she will be transferred again, this time to a South Vietnamese-controlled facility and eventually released in a prisoner exchange. She will go home missing a leg, carrying a memory of American surgeons who cut her open to save her life, and American guards who watched her every move afterward. Lan's path is longer. She holds out for days, then weeks. Eventually, she gives them fragments. Nothing useful, nothing that can endanger anyone. The Americans record it all anyway. Her wounds heal slowly. The scar on her thigh puckers and tightens, a constant reminder of the blast that ended one life and began another. By early 1969, she is moved again, this time by truck, hands loosely bound, escorted by South Vietnamese troops. Where she goes afterward becomes harder to trace. Records thin out, names disappear, files close. But her evacuation remains. Years later, Captain James O'Neill sits in a small house in Ohio, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. The war has been over for decades. When asked about Dustoff missions, he doesn't talk about heroism, he talks about weight limits, weather, bad radios. Then sometimes he pauses. "There were women," he says. "People forget that. We didn't." U.S. Army Medical Corps reports back this up, quietly and without drama. Patient logs list female VC alongside male VC, same triage categories, same mortality rates. Gender didn't change the protocol. If the wound was critical, Dustoff flew. For the women who survived, that decision carried consequences no one in the helicopter could control. Some were interrogated, some were imprisoned, some were exchanged, some returned to the fight after months of recovery. Others never walked properly again, their stories fractured and scattered, rarely recorded in full. But for a brief window, measured in minutes between jungle and hospital pad, they were treated not as symbols, not as enemies, but as human bodies bleeding out in the back of a helicopter. Dustoff didn't ask who they were, only whether they were alive.